John Gottman. Anyone familiar with John Gottman? I think, Barbara, you're nodding your head. So he's a researcher. He's well known, seriously funny guy, who has created love labs. And so he'll get a yummy couple and talk them into doing a finger prick test, a stress test, wear a heart rate monitor, do a urine test, and all of this and then put them behind glass, that one-way glass that his interns will monitor for a long weekend. So give them a short little bit of coaching, and then they go in and spend the weekend together. And guess what he finds out? How courageous they are? Yeah, probably. And what he found from his many, many years of research, and he's the only clinical psychologist in the world that's ever actually researched relationships. And so what he's found is that there are 4 operating systems, pretty much unconscious, that will derail a relationship. He, by the way, scientifically, with a 93.6% success rate, can predict the success or failure, the divorce of your relationship within less than 5 minutes. So he's done a lot of studying on this. And he's not in his first marriage either, just by the way, little side note. And so the 4 things were: people don't communicate, and here's the 4 areas that he specifically measured. They criticize, they have contempt, they become defensive, or they stonewall. So in those areas, I've taken his research and personalized it as well. So where do we do that with ourselves? Where do we say, oh yeah, I'm not going there. Yeah, I've tried it before, I'm not even gonna try again. That's my dream, but guess what? I'm too tired, too old, too young, too frivolous, too whatever, right? So there's that. And so in those relationship issues, they come from ourselves. So when I talk about the relationship of at home and work and play, as I added as you all walked in, that is a really important thing to know, that inside the research that he's done also has to do with you. So where do you criticize yourself? By the way, he's done studies. I don't like to label people or genders, but women are the ones that do what the most of those 4? Criticize, exactly. And what do the men do? Stonewall. Yeah. So that's good to know, because that's information that we can just catch ourselves as a gender. It doesn't mean that all women are that way or all men are that way, but it's really helpful to know that. So, and then think about, when do I do that with myself? When do I do that with the feminine aspects of myself? Get really critical of those parts of me, right? When do I really stonewall my own personal self? Like just get up and walk away from myself and not have that conversation anymore. So that's not John's research. That's kind of my version of his research that we can, work with as well. And so I'll move on in the essence of time. Goleman, Schmidt talked about and did some Harvard studies about emotional intelligence and how that wires and reprograms the brain in a way that really serves the whole system, and says then that has research from Yale that says very strong, solid leaders that have EQ, emotional intelligence, are very, very much, it was a 2012 study, that keep people aligned and keep them named as good leaders, even if they don't have good leadership skills or good leadership training. So Goleman, many of you are familiar with him when it comes to the emotional intelligence world, just because Daniel Goleman, I think, in my opinion, was the best person in marketing himself in the emotional intelligence world, when there were really some really hard researchers that really have a great deal of information as well. One of his studies, though, is been about hiring, getting hired. And he was able to prove that companies are now hiring for emotional intelligence. In other words, the neuroscience, the ability to integrate the gut, the heart, and the head. Okay, so not the geniuses that graduate from the Harvards and the Yales, but actually the people like you and me that can have a conversation, that it can exchange a look, and then know where that other person is. Or if we don't know, we have the energy and the presence to drop down and go, oh, what's that about? So some of my friends are known for me to say, hi, how are you doing? And they'll be like, I'm great. And I'll be like, convince me. And they're like, okay, could you just take great? I'm like, okay, if you want to pretend that's good, I'll honor that. But that level of knowing one another, because most of you know that, and many of you were in the workforce, when they're really asking us to come to work with heads with legs running around. I don't want to know about your personal life. I don't care what you're passionate about. Don't tell me about your family. I don't want to know if you've got kids or not, if you're married or you're divorced or what you're doing. Just come, check your gut and your heart at the door. I just want your brain. And they found very quickly, after about 10 years, that wasn't working at all. And think about in relationships. The more stressed we get in our relationship with ourselves or others, family, loved ones, community, partners, business or personal, the more we try to do that as well. Let me just think about this, right? We started this conversation with that. Let me just think about this. I'm not going to let my gut and my heart engage, when in fact that's when the most progress is actually made. So we'll do talk about that another time. So Ken Blanchard, many of you that are in the business world are familiar, I see some of your faces smiling, said that the best earthly relationship you can work on is the one with yourself. So knowing that, the more you anchor your own self-awareness, the more you then get to lead from a place of what I call the heart. So I want to just pause for a minute and just see if any of you have some comments or questions, and then give you an opportunity to do the heart lock-in, which I learned and taught. That's from Heart Math, and they've been around, at least 30 years now doing research on the brain in the heart, which they're saying and they're proving. We talked last time about their global coherence project and how that's affecting whole aspects of the areas where they have these meters and these registers that actually show what a difference the planet, the heartbeat of Mother Earth, is having, what an effect it is having, and also the communities around there, from crime to sometimes even the stock market, to the way that people are orienting themselves, the choices they're making, and the ways that they are living their lives in more peace and harmony, even though on the outside things are still very conflicted, as we know can be. Questions, comments?
Just what you're saying, I was thinking about what I was told about the Navy SEALs, and after they have a failed mission or they have an issue, they have an after-action review.
Yes.
It's the only time you can speak up to your commanding officers and yell at them and do whatever you want and not get any repercussion from it.
Exactly,
And,
exactly.
That's what I was thinking about.
And great, so that does, and so you can imagine what that does to their brain, because their brains are so wired for crime, for overcoming it, for overcoming all their emotions. And I've had the honor of, when I lived in Ouray, working with them in the ice park. And so I got to work with the belief system and how they can change the belief system to that can immediately then shift their energy, and in a way that then everybody, body, mind, and spirit, come in alignment. And in that way, then they are more effective, they're more efficient. Unlike what I was telling you, my best friend and colleague, Justine Damon, was shot and killed by the police in Minneapolis, Minnesota, almost a year ago, July 15th. And it was because a police officer was scared to death. She called 911. Someone was being raped in the back alley, evidently. We don't know, because the body cams and car cams weren't on. She went there to meet them in the alley and in her pajamas, and the officer shot across his partner through the window and killed her. And that's an example of how we can, obviously a police officer doesn't come into his career wanting to shoot somebody dead, especially when it's international news. She was the Australian bride that was getting married in a week. But that is something that happens when we're in that fight or flight stage and we're not aware of it. So that's a really important component that all of the from police departments to the SEALs do, and the SEALs do it really well. Pardon?
She was in Detroit.
She was in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Minneapolis.
Yeah, yeah. Justine Damon, what a sweetheart.
Hey, Melaney.
Yes.
So what about the industrial age and technology age really honing in here versus,
Right.
I forget what it's called before that, but versus being on the farm, working with
Yes.
doing things from that space. I mean, it's like we've really, popped into here.
Absolutely, yeah. So thanks for that. Barb's question was, and she, by the way, is a well-renowned coach in this world and in this community, that the brain has really shifted and changed, and so has relationship, due to the changes that we've made in our culture around how we make a living, how we live our lives. And I won't get negative around it, but that it does mean that we have to, where, when you lived on the farm and you got up when the chickens were crowing and the sun was up and it's time to collect eggs so that you can have breakfast, and then it's time to go bale hay and help with the chores and shovel the manure out of the stalls and all those kinds of things. It was a much more integrative process. They didn't need to take a yoga class or go to the gym, because they were that was a way of being for them. And if there was a fight, the fight got handled right then and there. And if there was a problem, the problem was resolved, even if it wasn't resolved the way we might like it. And so yes, that's, I think, we've got to fill in the gap between being present. I mean, study after study is showing getting in nature. You can go take a jog in New York City in Central Park, which is absolutely stunning and beautiful, but the heart-brain connection does not resonate in the same way that if we brought them to Durango, Colorado and went on a hike with them. And we know this, but now we can show studies. That's a great point of really, I guess, I don't know that you said what about, I don't know that you were asking a question, but we do have to put more mindfulness. I mean, the police officers in Minneapolis that dealt with this loss of my friend are now doing mindfulness in the police department. So how do we check in and align, and how do we do that in a world that really doesn't encourage that? And yet it does, but it's a very okay, now I go to yoga, and now I go to meditation, and on Saturday I go for a hike, and on Sunday I go do something spiritual or go to church, or And so it is, and that's why I give these monthly talks, because it's alive and well, and it's easy and simple. We have to keep the awareness and keep massaging it. So someone, who was it, was telling me you have an app on your phone that kind of, dings and takes you to a place of insight. Those are the kinds of things. We didn't have technology before. I mean, I couldn't call my mom was in the middle of a hayfield and just fell off my horse because I had a grand mal seizure. They figured it out when I came back to camp. The horse came back without me, and I was all black and blue and, not very happy when I got back 3 hours later, right? So, but that was life. You dealt with it, right? And I'd trade that for a lot of things that happen now, right? So it's relative in that it is our nature to be whole. It is our nature to be aligned. It is our nature to be body, mind, and spirit. And so the beauty is that now the naysayers, or those of us that are like, yeah, this guy, I mean, even Joe, people will still say, he's whacked, maybe he is, but I led a team in Santa Fe with 850 people with him, and watched people that hadn't walked, that hadn't talked, that had stuttered all their lives to the point that they couldn't finish a sentence, walk, talk, walk across a tie roll 40 feet above the air. Whatever that is, I call it neuroscience. I call it using the muscle in the brain in a way that causes us to shift and change. And to me, it's not shifting into something abnormal, it's returning home to how we came here, to all the elements of our wholeness, of our oneness with ourselves and others. So any other questions?
It just makes
Yeah.
me think of possibly the issues came about from divide and conquer.